Microsoft suddenly dropped a news bomb on everyone this week when they published not on a public blog actually. They published inside the Microsoft Admin Center that there'll be a new license, A365 or Agent 365, which will look like a normal human being and have an account in the Microsoft Enter ID, what used to be Azure ID, will be positioned in the org chart, almost like a normal agentic workforce. And it would require a license that would be assigned by an admin, which is an A365 license, and that's all we know basically. So let's discuss it today. It's very hot news, hot off the press. The Register wrote about it, a few other consultants wrote about it, but it seems like there's a massive confusion with what's going on. And I have with me today again to talk about Copilot Jukka Niiranen, who's already appeared on this channel. Jukka, thank you for being with me today, for agreeing to quickly jump on the hot mic. And basically, I'd let you explain this in better detail than I just did.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me again on this show. So it's the announcements from Microsoft in the admin center was pulled back after a few hours. Obviously it contained a bit too much information that was supposed to be kept under the blanket before the Ignite keynote, probably. But already back in August, we heard there was a scoop from Tom Warren from The Verge, who's writing the Microsoft Notepad newsletter, and he had heard from Redmond that there was this new product initiative called Agent 365, or that it would become an official product. And so I wrote some speculations about it already back in August based on just that piece of information, what it could be. And there's still no full validation of kind of what it's going to contain, how it's going to be priced. But I'd say that this scoop about it being an actual product, meaning that you pay for it, you have to buy it. It's not just something that appears under some other subscription. Then I think that has been now validated by that leak of the A365 acronym that was there for a brief moment, and we're probably going to be hearing a lot more about that in the coming months when we actually figure out what are these agents supposed to be for, and how are they different from all the other types of agents that we already have in the Microsoft Cloud.
One of the questions we had today from I can't really name the source at the moment. They will unveil themselves soon. Was whether the already existing agents, which licensing wise today sit kind of inside Microsoft 365 Copilot, but still require additional premium functionalities and add-ons. And we're talking about project coordinator, facilitator, and all the other agents that Microsoft announced recently that sit at the Microsoft 365 ecosystem. And the question was whether we think that they will become one of those agents that will be able to be created as almost like a human user inside the company. What do you think about that? Whether we're going to have that shift?
Yeah, I mean, it could go either way. The really problem here is that the already before the announcement, there's such a broad scope for like what an agent can be in Microsoft products. I mean, we have those, for example, SharePoint has agents, but really they are just glorified search engines or like a search scope for stuff that you can search a site and then you'll get an LLM citing information back to you based on your prompt. And that doesn't even fill the criteria of what generally the industry or like the developers or what, for example, Anthropic was using as the definition of what is an agent. It was about it being an LLM model that calls tools in a loop. And that loop is something now that really does exist when we look at the Microsoft Agent Framework documentation. So the kind of an open source framework that was published maybe a month ago to the developer audience, and which is probably going to be now the foundation for how you build these new A365 agents. So there, it is a lot about the having a loop there that calls tools and queries, MCP servers, and other data sources, and yeah, does actual work. So it's interesting to see that are we gonna then get a new name for those, let's say, kind of fake agents that exist today in those products, or those there's many entry points that Microsoft has introduced for people to build their own agents today inside M365. Very simple user interfaces for add a few documents, point a few links, and then get a chatbot to be able to respond to you based on your queries. But again, there's no loop, there's no autonomy, you don't give an assignment to that kind of agent and it doesn't then complete it. It's just like using a search engine more like. So Microsoft themselves have like muddied the waters by their previous rush to call everything an agent. They started that like roughly a year ago when they then replaced, for example, that in Copilot Studio that you create agents and not bots. So everything went into the agent lingo at that point in time. And now then I'm pretty sure that not all of that can fall under the A365 license immediately now. It can be so that maybe we have like more ways to pay for existing features that used to be under that per user Copilot licenses, but who knows? So there's so many ways to potentially there's no FAQ that would from Microsoft that would say that okay, what is an agent that would cover all their products? They don't agree on that, the different product teams.
They published this screenshot I just put on screen, introducing Agent 365. Coachable, adaptive, and context-aware, these agents collaborate effortlessly, becoming an intuitive part of your team from day one. I can kind of understand, and by the way, look at the interesting detail here. Support agent from ServiceNow. Authored by ServiceNow, Ava efficiency gains by Microsoft. Wellness center by Apollo Hospitals. They agents. Now, by the way, I have to admit, I didn't pay attention to third parties being mentioned here. So let's talk about economics, because I mean, this channel is mostly these days about economics, not just licensing. So here's my understanding. Please correct me if I'm wrong, because there are alternative opinions. Before we even jump into this whole conversation about average revenue per agent. So my understanding is that they will have accounts in Entra ID, almost user-like, with an email, Teams access, Office access, and all of that. I understand that the A365 license is almost like a substitute for M365 license, the normal user license, making them effectively a user of M365 with bundled, because otherwise it wouldn't work, with some kind of bundled flavor of Copilot inside of that license. So it's an M365 access license with agentic and AI capabilities, but I don't think, although that will probably have a fixed price, I don't think it's going to be the end of the costs. Because if you look at how users behave with Copilot, so you have add-ons, you have premium functionality, you have capacities, you have pay-as-you-go plans, and all that complexity of the current Copilot agent, whatever you call it, whatever Microsoft calls it these days, AI functionality. Is it how you see this? Now, by the way, sorry, this is what I wanted to say. Plus potentially paying something else to those third parties that created these agents.
Yeah, I mean, there's also another piece of news published that there's going to be a no-code publishing channel for third parties to get their agents into this store. That's also part of the roadmap already. So yeah, I mean, all the stuff that has been published under the Microsoft Agent Framework, which was said that it's not a commercial product. It's just more like a way to like how to make agents behave and work together. So yeah, I mean, if for example you're using a support agent from ServiceNow, then of course they can determine that okay, do you have the privileges to access that agent? But an interesting kind of a scenario that was mentioned there in that message, which was then pulled back, was that there's going to be these agent templates. And so now we can then start to think that, okay, are we going to have like multiple instances of that support agent for each user who then burns one A365 license for that instance? So you can get, for example, because it also mentioned that these agents are going to be learning from how you use them, what kind of tasks you give to them. So yeah, there's probably going to be some very personal information that you as a user will be giving to them. There's not going to be one support agent for the whole organization that you then interact with via the Copilot or Teams user interfaces, but rather these might be just like the Microsoft monetization model could then be that how many individual users for that support agent there are going to be within the Microsoft tenant, plus then what kind of admin and governance capabilities are given to that, so that the organization will trust them that, okay, we can allow them to use the support agent by ServiceNow for these tasks and to train it to become their personal support agent. Some scenarios there to potentially look at once they announce these things at Ignite.
Yeah, we still have to wait until Ignite, but people are speculating. We can't afford as experts to remain quiet. Although speculations sometimes can be a double-edged sword. You know, you assume something, you speculate on something, and then it doesn't materialize. But this seems like this is going to happen. You know, judging by the screenshot that I've just hidden. I'll go quickly on the tangent because we have a message from LinkedIn telling asking us how is this GDPR compliant, because effectively it's that is automated processing of potentially personal identifiable data. That will it require additional user consents and whatnot? I mean, from my point of view, I don't see how this could be a problem. If you're an external entity to an organization, it already processes your data. If you're an employee, you're kind of bound by the terms of the contract. So, but to be honest, I don't know what to say here, but maybe you have something to say.
So also in that visit center announcement, there was the concept of a sponsor of the agent. So there's going to be someone who's going to be the superior of that agent that's going to be then doing work for you. And I bet that is how the kind of responsibility and liability is then arranged, so that when Sasha goes and provisions a support agent from ServiceNow to work as some expert doing some customer support on your website or whatever, then you are kind of responsible for how it behaves, what kind of data is accumulated there. So I bet that it will be, the concept is going to be most lucrative for Microsoft when they can kind of see that there's going to be more licensable agents than there are users. So Sasha will be using many agents. You'll have the support agent, then you have the licensing agents or whatever, and these kind of capabilities in there. And if they are sufficiently, let's say, semi-autonomous, so you can give them tasks and they go and perform those, so they analyze data from your customers or whatever and do things on background, then they report back to you, but you always sort of hand out the data to them. I'm pretty sure that they also can then potentially borrow your identity for searching via MS Graph or information. But again, it could be so that maybe this offers then a way to limit it so that it's not going to be you it's not your identity that's doing the searching via the graph, for example. But you could say that, okay, for this support agent, we only are going to let that AI talk with this portion of the data.
It probably will be. I mean, if they become effectively let's say agentic user, a user entity in Entra ID, almost treated like a user. Non-human accounts are nothing new to Active Directory or Entra ID at all. We've had robot accounts and system accounts and service accounts there since the introduction of the the whole Active Directory service. Even before that, in just the security database of Windows infrastructure, we could already create accounts for robotic entities. But it just seems like, whether that's just the hype or is it the vision of the future, it almost seems like we are getting androids without bodies yet, with managers assigned and security rights, because humans also, if IT security in an organization is well defined and well managed, users also have access to certain things and are denied access to certain things. So it's only logical that agents would be also through Enter ID. Maybe that's the reason why actually they adding them as Enter ID accounts. Through Enter ID, through group policies, through traditional domain security groups infrastructure. So nothing new is being introduced in that regard. Would it actually help data governance instead of making it more complex? I'm an old school sysadmin, and to me, that's not a bad idea. If I can control what my agents can or cannot do by using the tools that have been known to sysadmin community since Windows NT 351, whatever the version was, why not? It seems like data governance will become easier. What's your opinion?
Yeah, I totally expect that this will be largely a governance play rather than there being some magical new capabilities for agents. So if we look at the team who was based on Tom Warren's warning assigned to be building this product, then it was a combination of people leading Dataverse and then also members from the Microsoft 365 Admin Center team. So all that kind of signals that we're going to have something official, something enterprise ready for managing all the different kinds of agents that may be now knocking on the doors, which users might otherwise be applying via their regular identity, but then that can potentially give them too much rights to read all the stuff. So if you are the manager of a team, then you will have access to more data than your subordinates in the human world. So similar kind of concepts could probably be then used as the setting point for why you should be encapsulating these agents under an identity of their own, rather than just doing sort of similar things as you would do on the, let's say, Power Platform side. If you are building cloud flows by Power Automate to do processing of incoming emails based on rules that you defined, or like notifications, then there's always been, that has been very citizen developer driven, those based in ROs, and the problem being there that then you the user are giving your access credentials to an agent, to an app or something out there in the cloud. That's essentially how all of this the low-code tooling has worked, because there has been no other way. You just give your OAuth token there, and then they store it in the bank, and then the apps and automations can do stuff on your behalf. But it's hardly been ideal. There's because I've worked a lot on the Power Platform side of things, so these scenarios for building things internally that have been about automation, it's always been kind of a tricky that you often need to then ask for separate service accounts to be given to a product like Power Automate, which has really been designed to be user-centric. But now when there's going to be so much automation, these autonomous things that are called agents doing similar things with APIs as Power Automate, but maybe we can now then sort of formalize that into being a different layer that's separate from the user. We didn't have that before in these automations because there was no concept of the agency. We didn't believe that machines could be sort of figuring out that, okay, what tool to use when. We always told them the exact route. We used RPA, you put robots to click on always this thing, but now we are giving more power to the AI agents, and probably need to be a way to then also restrict it a bit more, that if and when something goes wrong, that it's not going to be always Sasha's ID who's going to be there, and you're going to be responsible for all the crazy things that your agent did by mistake, because LLMs do make mistakes by design. They are going to hallucinate until some big new discovery is made on the machine learning front of things.
Yeah, George Rezina is a famous person in the ITSAM community. Actually, he's asking, how should organizations structure licensing oversight, inventory controls, and financial guardrails to ensure responsible deployment and cost management of Gen AI and agentic AI agents? Oh gosh, that's a kind of warmth. Thank you, George, for the question. But I think the answer will never be found. This is
There'll be a
FinOps.
different answer next year when we have again new concepts here.
This is pure FinOps still, because okay, so let's assume I'll put something else on screen from Rich Gibbons, very famous, as famous as us probably, Microsoft licensing consultant. How can I add my screen? Just a sec, please bear with me. Why did it say stop screen sharing? Start screen sharing. This is what Rich wrote in his blog. He assumed that there may be different Agent 365 licenses, which, so still, nobody knows. Everybody, at this point in time, everybody basically speculates. Sorry, Yuka, I'll remove the question from your face. Who knows? Maybe there'll be licenses like this. Maybe not. Maybe it'll be just, as I said, just some kind of basic M365 equivalency of for an agent, which doesn't require all the apps to be physically installed and whatnot. That's our kind of suggestion. That's what's going to happen. But the problem is, Rich goes into what I already also mentioned, and Yuka mentioned, there'll be credit usage as well. There'll be other add-ons. Agents will probably heavily use other AI functionality. And the guardrails you need for such use, in my opinion, are the same guardrails we're trying to build for SaaS applications, for the current usage of AI, for Azure consumption, which strategically opens up a whole entire conversation that will probably won't even fit in 1 hour about procurement losing control of deals with Microsoft and other vendors because of pay-as-you-go models and subscriptions and cloud commitments and whatnot. If previously you kinda knew how many users you're gonna have, you could control the money you were going to spend on a certain vendor upfront. With all these consumption models, a lot of it needs to be reactive. And when we talk about reactive, I'm not talking about even with 1 month in arrears. It should be almost real time. So if agent license, let's assume it's the same license, it's the same as Microsoft 365. Management of those licenses, you start thinking, if it's an equivalent of a user license, then we'll just manage them as normal users. It won't be like normal users, because agents could be created and deployed and decommissioned and redeployed and changed at any point in time. If with a typical user, you hire an employee or a contractor, and that person is with you for at least a month or a year or multiple years, so the churn of accounts and licenses is something we're used to. We don't have to learn this again. People still make mistakes. The average consumption of Microsoft 365 licenses across clients we onboard is somewhere around 85% efficiency. So 15% is wasted. There is wastage. With this turnover and churn of humans in an organization, what will happen when we'll have an agent marketplace, an agent app store, and when an agent is created that requires a license, What's going to happen with that license when it's decommissioned? Is it going to be automatically unassigned? Are we going to have a massive surplus of annual subscriptions for A365 just in case? What if we need agents? How is it going to work? Or if we suddenly decrease the number of agents that we need, and we're still left with 1,000 of agent licenses, A365 licenses that we don't need anymore, but we keep paying for them because they're annual or 3 annual subscriptions on an MCAE agreement, for example. Plus, on top of that, we have the real-time consumption of all these capacities, messages, credits, or whatever else Microsoft decides to call them tomorrow. I'm sorry, I can't be less, less or more. I can't suppress my sarcasm about Microsoft renaming stuff all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of see the agent-based licensing model to be sort of, from a government's perspective, the worst of both worlds. It's sort of between the per user and consumption, but for kind of a logical reason. I mean, the more I say these things out loud about why would you need this layer, then the more I kind of envision that how we are going to be, or how customers are going to be sold this thing as something that's kind of responsible organizations who are taking AI seriously would then be applying this layer so they have the visibility and control. So I do believe that there's going to be lots of emphasis on the measurability from day one, because in a way things were very different 2 years ago when the Copilot features started coming along, and the kind of a storm there's been on the platform side of things when how to build Copilot studio agents, Copilot agent, whatever agents you call them. That has been shifting all the time. There's not been much. I mean, everything is basically different compared to 1 year ago today. But maybe we'd be now closer to like the V2 of like there being an actual plan in place for how this is gonna now win over the trust of customers. Because in a similar way as what Microsoft did on the Power Platform side, they came up with this the managed platform idea and like the managed environment, saying that okay, if you're using these things based on just the Office application context, so building apps and automations on top of things that are not using premium licenses, then you are going to be missing out on much of the management layer that comes if you pay for the premium license there. So similar kind of a strategy could well be now coming for the agents, so that if you want to build agents just with let your employees use those embedded capabilities in the per user M365 Copilot to create their own agents or run agents from Copilot Studio, then just go around. But if you want that layer, if you want the visibility, then pay up a bit more and put all those sort of certify all your agents to be in the having a proper Entra agent ID. That's also interesting, by the way. I checked just before this session that the Entra agent ID announcement that was made in May, it still says preview there in Entra. So meaning that there can well be some licensing layers now introduced on top of it before it goes GA. So the identities are there. They have copied all those existing agents from Azure side and from Copilot Studio side into Entra. But then if you want to activate the proper management layer on top of it, then probably there's some kind of a license needed there. And could it be something that's even in addition to Agent 365? Well, who knows? There's certainly no lack in creativity of how to formulate these kind of SKUs in Redmond.
Yeah, I don't want to pronounce doom and gloom. Come on, as much as it helps our sales to pronounce doom and gloom. In this case, I would just say yes, it's going to be difficult. If I wanted to kind of draw a bottom line under this, it's going to be difficult at the very beginning. And when I say very beginning, I give it at least 2 or 3 years to adjust, maybe longer, to the model when you have per agent licensing, when you have additional capacities, additional credits, third-party costs. Again, ServiceNow agent in the screenshot. I remind everyone. So you would have to probably pay to ServiceNow. Whether there's going to be functionality that's included already in the ServiceNow licenses you pay, or you'll have to buy new licenses. How is that going to work together? So this whole governance, it is going to become much more complex. Which I want to mention this, but before I go into a more in-depth topic, I want to ask you a very simple question, Yuka. Do you think it's a good change, in terms of progress? And does it only benefit Microsoft or organizations as well?
I think it can be a better approach than what they tried for the past 2 years with the $30 per user per month Copilot premium license, because that has been obviously not a huge commercial success in terms of what the adoption rates are based on unofficial reports. And so now we then see that there's lots of those Copilot chat features coming into Office applications, and sort of like no one really cares that much anymore about like whether how smart is your Outlook? Do you have the latest chatbot technology in there? We kind of have passed that marker that would be the wow thing, how you make your use of AI in our organization. So they kind of instead of just like stretching that model and like bringing more and more new stuff into that premium subscription while then giving away stuff for free as well, then introducing a new kind of a layer or concept, I think makes a lot of sense. A bit of a reset would be needed here so that we could sort of swipe away all those phone agents and then start talking about these things that today have an actual technical foundation there, models for agents to collaborate with one another, orchestrate multi-agent tasks. So yeah, we're in a much better place today compared to what the Copilot demos 2 years ago were about, when that sort of the current model was fixed and when the sales motion started that people should be buying that. So I'm kind of optimistic that it's a better outcome than trying to stick to the current model and just pushing it to be just the per user and then whatever additional Copilot credits are needed there. It's those are both concepts that weren't really born in the agentic era anyway. So if we are now kind of sort of accepting the fact that that we today are using these LLMs in a way that is fairly, in a way, agentic, even if we are doing software, then yeah, there's lots of coding agents. If we're doing research, then yeah, I mean, we give Claude or ChatGPT or Copilot a task and it goes and queries, does hundreds of different Google or Bing searches and produces stuff. So it's nothing like what we saw in ChatGPT 3 years ago. So a lot of steps have been taken, but then how on earth could we have known how could anyone know the right model to then commercially package this into a licensing model? And I sort of can't blame Microsoft for sort of running with what they had, but I think now they should be more prepared to demonstrate something that is not just the new text on agents, but rather something that also makes the customers more comfortable to start using those agents.
Yeah, I hope Microsoft will finally find a way to monetize their AI investment, because according to your calculations, actually, which many I call them AI bros, claim they're completely wrong, but they make sense. We did our own estimations that are very close to yours, that the adoption of Copilot right now is only 2%, which is ridiculous, to be honest. If Microsoft's current metric, revenue metric, is average revenue per user, if they're hitting the ceilings with who needs E5, how far can you push E5? And the adoption of Copilot is only 2%, which also, in turn, does not increase average revenue per user. If we discount home users who were just basically shown Copilot down their throat, unless they cancel and resubscribe,
Yeah.
It doesn't seem so positive. And you can only grow so far. Human population, the population of Earth does not grow at the same rate as Microsoft's revenue expectations. If they want this 18 to 32% growth per year that they've been achieving so far, it's per year, isn't it? Not per quarter. That would be too much. They need to find new ways to increase revenue. And as we predicted in the previous conversation with you and Daryl as well, they're moving to this, what we call as average revenue per agent. Maybe there'll be a different metric. How do you go outside the bubble of a user can only consume so much, a user can only need so much? You either increase the prices or you find a new metric that is non-human. So, but on the other hand, I mean, I'm all for development of AI. I'm not an AI doom caller like, oh, we're going to be all ruled by Skynet or whatever. Fantastic tools. We use AI daily, and if there's a clear ROI and use cases for AI, let it be agents, then by all means we'll embrace them. In our organization, in SumExpert, the ROI on the AI tools we use is 200 to 1. It's insane. It's not even like 2 to 1, 3 to 1, it's 200 to 1. It's crazy. And if that's the future we see, because the problem, sorry, I'm going a bit long on the tangent. What I'm trying to say is the problem with Microsoft's implementation of AI right now is they are either very niche, and there are successful projects we haven't heard about, but I believe they exist. Amongst our colleagues, friends, and ourselves as well, we haven't found a single real use case for Copilot. We're actually rolling back from Copilot to third-party AI tools with proper governance. I'm not saying without governance, with proper governance. Because just Copilot didn't deliver on the promise. We still don't see what the value of it at all. What, meeting summarization? There are tools that do it better. That's it. LLM and Excel, I mean, come on. We don't need an LLM in Excel. We need a small action model in Excel, not large language model for the use of for data analysis and whatnot. We need, funny enough, SAM, small action model. Yeah, software asset management migrates into small action models. So if agents that what did they write? Reason without explicit instructions and do something in the background, almost like what humans do. Maybe that's the future. Maybe that's the win-win for everyone. So it's not necessarily anything bad. Governance, as George rightfully asked, is going to be complicated. Governance is going to be very complicated. The other thing that, interestingly, my partner, my wife Nadia, said that, and she's not in IT. She's our brand manager, but she's not in IT. And she said she believes that the ceiling for the cost of AI is nearly where the salary is, because that's how economy works. Look at the price of electricity on motorways. It's almost comparable per mile, sometimes even higher per mile with regular fuel. I'm not talking about home charging, just that, because people are ready to pay that kind of money per mile. So the potential for agentic costs is to hit the same level of expense per agent as a salary of a human that was replaced by that agent. So at this time, it may be not that expensive, but that's where the economy allows it to grow. That's the ceiling. That's the psychological barrier, whatever you call it. Growing capitalism works in a way when they see your money, they take it. There's something I learned when I moved to the United Kingdom and have been watching for already over 15 years how this economy works. Yeah, that's roughly probably what we should expect. And governance around that will almost become as complicated as governance of employees with purchasing cards, shadow IT. Sorry, I know I'm going on another tangent, but imagine this: a very clever agent that quietly subscribes to software as a services to help it work, almost like a human. And if it has access to payment details or a card, oh, God help us.
Yeah, that's of course another avenue for licensing now. The computer use that's going to be then covered by Windows 365 for those agents that are going to have their own computers to click around in. And yeah, I mean, I agree with your sort of projections there that there's no like making this something that's going to be extra per each user, that it's just going to be like an E7 or E8 or whatever, then that's not a good sort of a long-term future direction for Microsoft or even probably for the customers. It makes sense to detach it from that. And I've seen a lot of friction around licensing in the Power Platform world, where in a way many of the tools that are in that local stack today, for example, multiplexing, the tools that are now in Power Automate, they are designed for multiplexing. So you create alternative UIs for doing things that used to require some dynamic slicing or whatever, or automating things. And there's been the sort of software that belongs under the same management. Then they are sort of like competing against one each other. That okay, is it? Can I use this product to like shortcut all the needs for the other product? And that's where it really becomes interesting, because right now I think in the sort of the first Copilot wave of from 2 years ago, roughly, we saw that there was a mandate for all product teams to implement Copilots, and so we got these additional sidecars in all the products. But then was there ever really like a mandate to like build something that's smart enough that it will then remove the need for the user licenses for Office or project or whatever? So that kind of a conflict is, you have to sort of accept the fact that it needs to happen. There needs to be a decrease in the number of user licenses at the same time as you then, as a tech vendor, you are rolling out these automation capabilities. You'd like to have them both, but it's not going to be credible if you sort of if internally Microsoft doesn't like align their incentives so that teams can then sort of sacrifice the old cash cows without being sort of impacted negatively by the fact that they sort of innovated themselves into or out of existence in a way.
Innovate themselves out of existence. Well, the thing about Microsoft is that although they had massive flops with phones, and I would say Xbox is not flying anymore as it used to, and they made other mistakes, overall the company has been always delivering, and they somehow recovered from all the major flops they had. I mean, look at the stock price. I still remember not so long ago when stock was what, $35. Now it's over 500, and it's still growing. So don't never underestimate their ability to deliver. I don't think they're gonna remove themselves, innovate themselves out of existence here. And then, speaking of which, I have no stock in Microsoft, so I have no interest. By the way, that's deliberate, because to be a completely an independent commentator or an expert, we decided to get rid of our stock as well. I mean, at least on my side. Interesting stuff. Let me ask you this question. So how many days do you think until we have more solid and concrete information?
Yeah, I mean, we are gonna probably have the keynote demos next week, but then is that gonna be the point in time when we also get the formal licensing information? It's well, in a way, with these AI-based services, there's been the concept of that production-ready previews. So, meaning it's a preview, but you have to pay for it. It's not a free to use until the preview ends, and then the official license prices are set. So, of course, Microsoft could be they're spending so much on AI anyway that it's not going to be a big factor if they would open up some free periods for this kind of a use there. But I'm kind of seeing that, especially with the uncertainty now in the market about the capex requirements for AI, the tide is sort of turning that if they can now show some numbers similar to what they did back in the days when the $30 was launched, and then people update their Excels and thought, okay, this is going to grow that much, then I kind of my guess would be that they are going to launch also the pricing model pretty close to the actual feature announcements. I'm hoping, and we saw it already there in the message centers. So the mechanism for assigning those licenses is going to be, or it's probably ready over there, and the admin team already thought that okay, we can push this thing out and like help people prepare for this. But then someone called it actually we cannot let them prepare for it too much in advance. So and now we are here speculating for the period until we get to that official drop of that licensing terms and pricing.
That is a good theory. I like it. So there'll be a sandbox, and the technical mechanisms for license assignment, maybe even mid-November, in the coming days, or I don't know, 1st of December, they could roll it out. Because traditionally, Microsoft introduces the biggest changes in licensing. I wouldn't say they never do it on different dates, but it's usually October and April. First and third quarter of Microsoft financial year. But it doesn't seem like with the hype around AI and the growing wave of skepticism, lots of experts are now skeptical about AI, and there's a lot of doom prediction. We're going to have another .com flop, bubble bursting with AI. Maybe. I don't think they can afford to wait until April to actually roll out those licenses. I don't think so. They need to move quickly. January, maybe, post Christmas. February, yeah, it'll happen sooner rather than later, but we'll see. That's an interesting prediction. I don't want to bet on it. I wouldn't bet any money on it. But yeah, probably what you're saying makes sense. Given the teams at the admins the ability to play around with it, I don't believe there's going to be a massive tsunami of adoption of that thing. It'll be careful and cautious, enthusiastic testing rather than unless third parties like ServiceNow, as we've just seen, start pushing that themselves. And for the revenue stream, I'm thinking Microsoft creating a marketplace of third-party agents is a great idea for Microsoft. Marketplaces are evil for procurement, but it's a great idea for Microsoft. There's another thing about marketplaces, as I open this kind of worms, is that the average buyer of a marketplace, even in an organization, is a 27-year-old person. Much less responsibility. I'm sorry, young generation. Much less responsibility. Much more enthusiasm. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's just a fact we need to deal with and be prepared for. Interesting stuff. Will you be one of the first testers, Yuka? Like this, the second they make it available, you'll probably deploy something and start blogging about it.
Yeah, start kind of hitting the walls and seeing when it breaks. That's what I usually do with these things. So as long as there's going to be some pay-as-you-go option that doesn't have like an enterprise barrier, then yeah, I'm going to be there trying to see where the sort of theory does not meet practice. But as mentioned, I'm not kind of like I don't have a negative expectation for the agentic model. I'm kind of like hoping that they would now roll something that can be adopted by customers without sort of avoiding to addressing those obvious flaws and gaps that have existed there. We've had too much of that kind of like everybody has to have the happy marketing face on and talk about Copilot, and then the reality is very different. So it's not sustainable. We are kind of like, we need to get to a place where then people are sort of realistic. And I'd imagine that, I mean, people are not expecting for AI to like go away. They're more like waiting, okay, that's, if only it would work a bit better, if we only would know more about it and have guardrails in place, then yeah, we could sort of take it into use. I'm expecting that eventually we have to get to that place, mature enough. Is it going to be now 2 years after the first Copilot wave? Well, it could be. I mean, things have been, there have been so many different cycles there of like rebranding and changing things around that maybe we sort of compressed 5 years of like local experience into now 2 years of AI development and arrived at a place where agents could actually then be really useful for customers.
Before we close this stream, I want to run another question here, which Rich Gibbons asks in his articles. If they can join meetings and send emails, messages to people, what happens if they go rogue? Same as with people. Same as with people, honestly.
Yeah, but I mean, look at the products that Microsoft is already pushing for Dynamics 365 sales. There's these lead qualification agents that they are setting that, okay, send out these emails to customers and like collect data from them. So is it then like any worse that it happens then internally in the organization, maybe that they are allowed to send emails internally? You create that some team manager or whatever, and it can send an email to anyone in the org, but not outside the tenant. Well, the governance guardrails in place. I mean, yeah, it's people are. Is it going to be that much worse that people then use Copilot or ChatGPT to write an email that they're not going to read and send it? It says your name there, but if you didn't write it or if you use somebody is not going to read it anyway, then we are kind of we already lost the battle there for that sort of total validation that it's always from a human when it's something creative.
We did, didn't it? Yeah, people write emails that nobody reads. It's just crazy. We had this discussion in one of the group calls, like closed calls, and the moderator asked a question of, are we going to have agents writing for our sales proposals and then other agents reviewing the sales proposal? By the way, it's already happening.
Of course.
But my answer to him was, you're not looking at the whole picture. In the future, it's not going to be like this. Agents are not going to write full-scale proposals, and other agents read them and run through traditional procurement systems. It's going to be AI talking to AI in AI language, much shorter, saving tokens, cutting the crap out, or introducing more crap. but it's going to be completely different. The AI and agentic future, if it materializes, because I've been dealing with data exchange systems since, I don't know, 1998 probably, in e-commerce, and I hope it actually happens. I hope we can cut the middlemen out, and that's probably what's going to happen. And the world will be a completely different place. And I wouldn't be afraid of it. I think we need to embrace it.
Yeah, also a good point about the kind of optimizing the interactions there. So this model that if now the Agent 365 license is something that is sort of an abstraction from the consumption layer, so that you don't have to count each of the credits there, but there'll be something bundled in there that the agents can use. Then that would sort of also shield away the kind of, or give Microsoft the incentive that, okay, we can now get more money if we optimize then the usage of how these agents perform there in the background, without making all the all the different like messages, all the calls, all the API calls so transparently visible to the customers in the Copilot credit way. Sure, the credits are not the same as like real cost of compute, but still it's similar as when you are paying for Azure resources. And it needs to be something a bit more simplified, and a model where there's something to be gained from making the AI work more efficiently. Because users are not going to be then, they're going to give a task to their agent, and then it's not up to them to like figure out that is it going to do 100 API calls or 10 or whatever. If I'm a sort of an app maker or automation maker today, I can affect that. But once I give it to a prompt to an LLM, then it's out of my hands. So someone else then has to sort of manage that, optimize that. And if I have to look at or worry about it, okay, is the agent now going to take the route of 100 calls or 10 calls? I'm not going to trust it. So there needs to be a way to sort of like leave that in the engine room and then make it something that, for example, could be covered by a new license type, like per agent licensing.
Yuka, thank you very much. I think by at this time we promised that we're not going to be live over 1 hour. We need to let people go back to their offices and continue doing productive work. Thank you, everybody who's been with us today. Many more people on LinkedIn than on YouTube today, which is I completely understand why. So if you're not yet following Yuka, just copy his name from the stream, take his name, search him on Google. You'll find him very easily. It's basically first link. And on LinkedIn, he writes a lot about he's not only a practitioner, he's also a very good blogger. That's why I like having him here as well. And you can follow us, search our names, and we will be back. Hopefully you'll join us when there'll be more tangible information somewhere around November 18th to November 21st. We'll do another live conversation when there'll be more. Hopefully there'll be more information about, especially the economics of agents, because that's what ultimately worries people in business. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Goodbye, everybody. Have a great, productive rest of the week.